Choosing the right agency in a market where there's an oversupply and an increasing complexity of marketing requirements can be a challenging task for CMOs and procurement teams. So today we're discussing the agency selection process and how to create the most efficient and cost-effective agency operating model. Myself and Richard are joined in the studio by Tony Spong from the AAR. Tony sat through more pitches than anyone I can think of and worked agency and client side before moving to the AAR. So Tony, do you want to start by telling us a bit about the AAR itself and the role of an intermediary?
You hit the right word, which is oversupply. So we are basically a Google search engine for people who haven't got a lot of time to find the right agency partner. So we'll start with understanding their brief, and then we'll go out into the market and find the right agency for them. So we'll just take all the legwork out of the process.
So from a B2B point of view, how do you see B2B differing? Because I think most people would think of the AAR as being a matchmaker for B2C clients with big budgets. In the B2B space, a lot of our viewers will only have budgets of 250,000 a year, that kind of figure. Should they be pitching?
Yes, is the short answer. I think B2C, yes, there's just more brands in that space, therefore there are more agencies serving B2C. But B2B, whilst it comes around less frequently, we've still worked with global brands as well as small local brands. So anyone who's stuck, we can help. We don't just find agencies that can only work with big budgets. We actually pride ourselves on finding small agencies who can work with small budgets, or big agencies who can work with small budgets. So it's about finding the right partner for the problem.
With the rise of digital, we've seen an increase in specialist agencies versus integrated agencies. What are your thoughts on whether a client should be selecting a specialist partner or an integrated agency?
Clients are at various stages. So some prefer the specialist model where they choose one tool for each job that needs doing. What's interesting at the moment is that there are so many jobs that need doing. Clients are realising they've got too many agencies to manage at the moment. And they're trying to find new ways of either restructuring themselves or restructuring their agencies in order that they can collapse some of the things into one agency. Whatever happens, the client is looking for a specialist answer to the problem. Sometimes the specialist answer to the problem is an integrated agency, because it is not going to buy a second-rate agency, whatever format, whatever model. It has to believe that what they've just bought is the best of everything they've just looked at.
What we find for B2B, back to the budgetary issue, that the B2B budgets are smaller, typically they're smaller. So when we find clients who fragment their budgets over multiple agencies, the promise of an integrated agency is that it's not just that we're easier to manage in terms of like relationships and process and things like that, but actually it's to do with consistency of work. So if we're coming up with a big idea that's got to be integrated and delivered for outbound awareness programs right the way through to lead generation and sales enablement, for example, that keeping that all in one place with the same creative teams, the same copywriters, the same designers, just keeping it all with the same people, you end up with a consistency of tone, consistency of behaviours, consistency of message. Those clients that we see that often that then might have a specialist in one particular area versus another, we find it very, very fragmented. So social media is the obvious area where we look at someone's tone in social media versus their tone in their website copy, for example, and they can be so vastly different. It's like they're different brands.
So it's no surprise that a lot of clients are taking social in-house in order to try and control that. But on the basis, most of social media is run by people under 30. It's putting a lot of pressure on the brand agencies to come up with guidelines about, so what's my tone of voice? So no surprise that I had an email this morning, there are copywriting courses springing up all over the place at the moment. The DMA are doing one. There were two ex-PR consultants now offering copywriting. There's agencies specialising in just language branding. So there's a huge upsurge now in the understanding of language. So again, we're in a market that's just emerging. These are some of the consequences of social media that perhaps weren't thought through right at the beginning. And therefore, it's an opportunity for an agency to talk about it, how we're going to manage this, and equally for a client to put something out to market to say, I'm beginning to understand I've got a problem.
So in terms of the pitch process itself, What do you see, because we see it managed with varying degrees of professionalism, what do you see best practice looking like in terms of the pitch process?
The best ones we work on are where the marketing or whoever the key stakeholders are and procurement are there together at the start. Both, therefore, have managed to input into the process, and from there we can help design a process much better. Quite often procurement is sometimes driving the whole thing, which can be a good thing in many instances, to be honest, but equally they are often left until too late, and then they introduce some things that they need which we could have managed a lot earlier into the process and saved a lot of time for everyone. The worst thing that can happen is when something comes in late, that it fundamentally affects which agencies are now in the final phase, and that's not a nice place to be in, because all of a sudden you're faced with the prospect that none of the agencies are the right agency, and that's what we're trying to avoid.
What about the type of agency? I mean, how do you get your shortlist? Because we found that we've pitched against agencies that are very surprising for us. We're a B2B agency. We would consider ourselves to be integrated. I know that word can be difficult to define sometimes, but sometimes we're up against design agencies, like pure play kind of branding agencies, that don't really even have copywriters in the way that we would consider the need to creatively articulate a proposition. So, for advertising, direct marketing, digital, we're working across all those different mediums. But it seems strange that we can be up against a PR agency, or we could be up against a design agency.
No, and there's a very good reason for that. It's because an email goes around an organisation and says, I'm doing this, has anyone got any agencies they'd like to put into the mix? And if they haven't got a good enough filter at their end, they'll please George or Sally by including those agencies. So to some extent, you stand a better chance in a mixed bag of agencies, because it soon becomes very clear who the expert is to answer this problem. When it comes to an intermediary, we're a bit of a nightmare for someone like, because they'll all be B2B agencies who are fully integrated and are very happy to work on budgets between 50 and $1 million, because that's the brief. We've interrogated the brief. So we'll put people together who are more similar than less similar. And what we find, one of the things to ask for at the beginning is, could you give me a list of all the people you think should be on this? And then we'll give the client answers as to why that PR agency or that B2B agency is wrong for this type of brief.
We find in many cases clients aren't disclosing budgets to us in pitches, which we find very strange. It obviously makes it difficult for us to assess whether we should be pitching or not. It makes it difficult for us to come back with a proposal that fits to their budget if we don't know what it is. Why do you think clients are so reluctant to disclose budgetary figures?
They genuinely don't know what the budget should be, and that's why one of the reasons they're pitching is for you guys to tell them. So, for example, I had my patio recently relaid. I had no idea what it was going to cost, absolutely none whatsoever. So what do? You get 3 quotes in and that sort of thing. That's why you do that. So if there is no budget, then what you should do is, when you present your case studies, you should present a price range. And then you can say to the client, your gut feel, is it at this level or that level? So you have to take the lead, because you're the expert. You're the guy laying the patio. If Chris said to me, I've no idea, Tony, either, you go, that's a bit strange. The guy lays patios week in, week out. He should have a rough idea about, very quickly looking at my backyard and go, that's going to cost you $7,000 or 20 grand. I kind of expect him to at least narrow it down for me. So where you've got no budget, play the same game. Say, this case study, which we think is relevant, came in at this price, and this case study came at that price. We think you're somewhere in between. Would you agree?
So one thing that's quite obvious that we haven't really talked about is the human chemistry element between an agency and client. What do you find in terms of how it influences the pitch process, as well as actually the successful relationship in terms of once you've started working together? What have you found the most important things to think about on there?
No, chemistry is absolutely vital. I've been at the AAR 10 years now, and it took me to my 3rd pitch process that I was working on before I realised how powerful the emotional connection is. I thought, given the size of budgets and how sensible clients would be, this would be a huge amount of rational tick boxing. It's not at all. It's not at all. It's all about the emotional connection. If they can believe in you and believe in your point of view of how to solve this problem, then you'll go pretty much all the way. And then your job post-appointment is to maintain that.
But from from an agency perspective as well, I think the chemistry is very important too. We have clients that treat us like suppliers, and then we have clients that treat us like partners. And there's a huge difference in terms of how we work together.
Yeah. Where agencies want true partnership, then you've got to celebrate those. So even in the way you present your case studies, you can talk about how the partnership works as much. So the client, even before they've chosen you, begin to understand what's going to be involved here. And either not choose you because they don't want to work like that, which is great, saves you a load of money and time, or they actually get the agency they really, really need and deserve.
Tony, thank you very much for joining us today. I'm afraid that's all we have time for. Some really interesting points have been raised around working with multiple agency specialists versus an integrated agency, the pitch process, and the importance of basic human chemistry, as an agency should be seen as a partner, not a supplier, to ensure you get the most out of the relationship. If you have any thoughts on what's been discussed and want to share your input on the agency relationships that have worked best for you, or any challenges that you constantly find, you can join the conversation via the hashtag B2BTV or email us directly at b2btv@trueagency.com. From myself, Richard and Tony, goodbye for now.